I was standing in my driveway in Phoenix, Arizona, staring at a pink plastic flamingo that I definitely did not put there, when I realized my HOA president was trying to destroy my life. The flamingo wasn't even the worst part. Scattered across my front lawn were about 15 garden gnomes in various offensive poses, a rusted shopping cart on its side, and what appeared to be a broken toilet planter with actual weeds growing out of it. I had left for work at 7 that morning with a pristine yard that I meticulously maintained according to every single rule in our Sunset Ridge HOA covenant. Now, at 5:30 in the evening, my property looked like a trailer park yard sale had exploded across it. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. This was insane. This was absolutely insane. But even as I documented the mess, I knew exactly who was behind it: Patricia Mooreland. Patricia had been the HOA president of Sunset Ridge for 6 years, and in that time, she had made it her personal mission to fine, harass, and generally torment anyone who didn't kiss her feet. She was 52 years old with that aggressive blonde bob haircut that somehow always looks both expensive and cheap at the same time. She drove a white Lexus SUV with a custom license plate that said Prez 4U, and she had never, not once in the 3 years I'd lived here, smiled at me without it looking like a threat. The problem started about 4 months ago when I had the audacity to vote against her proposal to increase HOA dues by 40%. The meeting had been contentious. Patricia had presented this elaborate PowerPoint about necessary community enhancements that mostly seemed to involve installing decorative brick columns at the neighborhood entrance that nobody wanted or needed. I'd done my homework, presented actual numbers showing our reserves were healthy, and convinced enough neighbors to vote it down. Patricia's face had gone so red I thought she might actually combust right there in the community center. She had smiled that terrible smile and said, "Well, David, I hope you're prepared to follow every single rule in our covenant. Every single one." I had laughed it off at the time. I was a rule follower by nature. I'd read the entire covenant before I even made an offer on my house. My grass was always between 2.5 and 3 inches tall. My house was painted in approved colors. My trash cans were never visible from the street except on collection days. I even made sure my car was parked perfectly centered in my driveway. But apparently, following the rules wasn't enough. Patricia wanted revenge. The violations started small. 2 weeks after the meeting, I got a notice that my mailbox post needed repainting. I went out to look at it with the notice in my hand, and sure enough, there was a small scratch on one side. The thing was, I had just repainted that mailbox 3 months earlier. That scratch hadn't been there the day before. I would have bet my life on it. I repainted it anyway. Cost me $40 and 3 hours on a Saturday. Then came a notice about my trash cans being visible from the street. The photo attached to the violation showed my garbage can about 2 inches past the fence line. I knew for a fact I had pushed those cans fully behind the fence because I always did. Always. But there it was in the photo, just barely visible. Another $100 fine. Then my house number was too faded and needed to be replaced. My garden hose was visible from the street. My doormat was the wrong size. Each violation came with a fine and a smug little note from Patricia reminding me that community standards must be maintained. I started getting paranoid. I took photos of my entire property every single morning before I left for work and every evening when I got home. I documented everything. My girlfriend Rachel thought I was losing my mind. "David, you're obsessing," she had said last week while I was taking pictures of my mailbox from 6 different angles. "Just pay the fines and move on. It's not worth the stress." But it was worth it, because I wasn't crazy. Those violations were appearing out of nowhere, and I was going to prove it, which brought me to 3 weeks ago when I made the best decision of my entire life. I installed security cameras, not just 1 or 2 cameras. I installed 6 high-definition cameras with night vision, motion detection, and cloud storage that covered every single angle of my property. The company, Safe Home Systems, had done the installation in about 4 hours. They were discreet, professional, and the cameras were nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. I didn't tell anyone about the cameras. Not Rachel, not my neighbors, nobody. I just waited. And now, staring at this absolutely absurd display of trash and tackiness on my lawn, I felt a surge of vindication mixed with rage. Because I absolutely knew that everything that happened today was recorded in perfect high-definition video. I pulled out my phone and opened the Safe Home app. My hands were actually trembling as I navigated to today's footage and started scrubbing through the timeline. I had left for work at 7:15, nothing unusual. The mailman came at 10:30, nothing unusual. A dog walker passed by at 11:15, nothing unusual. Then, at 1:47 in the afternoon, a white Lexus SUV pulled up in front of my house. I felt my heart hammering in my chest as I watched Patricia Mooreland step out of her car, look around quickly, and then open her back hatch. She was wearing yoga pants and a pink tank top, her blonde bob pulled back in a stubby ponytail. She pulled out the pink flamingo first and practically ran across my lawn to stab it into the ground near my driveway. "Got you," I whispered, but she wasn't alone. As I continued watching, another car pulled up behind hers. A silver Honda sedan. Out stepped Janet Crawford, the HOA vice president and Patricia's loyal lapdog. Janet was about the same age as Patricia, but with dark hair and a perpetually nervous expression. She was carrying a cardboard box that she set down on my lawn. The two of them worked quickly. Janet unpacked garden gnomes while Patricia arranged them in a semicircle. They were actually laughing. I could see their mouths moving, heads thrown back. They were having fun framing me for code violations. My footage showed them hauling out the shopping cart together, struggling a bit with the weight. Patricia directed Janet to tip it on its side at just the right angle. Then came the toilet planter, which Patricia positioned near my front walkway like it was a prized sculpture. The whole operation took them maybe 15 minutes. When they were done, Patricia stood back with her hands on her hips, surveying their work like an artist admiring a masterpiece. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures from multiple angles. Then both women got in their vehicles and drove away. I saved the footage immediately, downloading it to 3 different locations including my laptop, an external hard drive, and a separate cloud service. Then I just stood there in my driveway, my mind racing. This was conspiracy. This was fraud. This was intentional destruction of property value and harassment. This was so many things that I couldn't even process them all at once. My phone buzzed. An email from the HOA. "Dear Mr. Patterson," it began. Of course, Patricia would use my last name when she was pretending to be professional. "It has come to our attention that your property is in severe violation of multiple community covenants. Photographic evidence shows extensive decorative items not approved by the Architectural Review Committee, as well as abandoned property and general disarray. This is completely unacceptable and creates an eyesore for the entire community. You are hereby fined $1,500 and must remove all violations within 24 hours or face additional fines of $500 per day. This matter will also be referred to our legal counsel for potential further action. $1,500. I read the email 3 times. Attached were photos that Patricia must have taken minutes ago, showing my lawn in all its manufactured chaos. She had already filed the violation. She had already processed the fine. This was premeditated, planned, and executed with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged before. But Patricia had no idea what was coming. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning up my lawn. Every gnome, every piece of trash, every offensive item went into garbage bags that I hauled to my garage. I documented everything as I went, taking photos and even weighing the bags. 7 bags total, 63 pounds of garbage that these women had dumped on my property. When I was done, I went inside and opened a bottle of beer. Then I sat down at my laptop and started researching Arizona laws regarding HOA violations, fraud, trespassing, and harassment. I also started looking for lawyers. By midnight, I had compiled a folder with the video footage, all my documentation, copies of every violation notice I had received, and a timeline of Patricia's escalating harassment. I had also found a lawyer named Marcus Chen who specialized in HOA disputes and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless. I sent him an email with the subject line, "HOA president caught on camera planting false evidence." I attached the most damning 30-second clip of the video showing Patricia and Janet unloading trash onto my lawn. Then I included a brief summary and my phone number. I didn't expect to hear back until morning, so I was shocked when my phone rang at 12:45 a.m. "Mr. Patterson. This is Marcus Chen. I just watched your video footage." His voice was energized, almost excited. "Do you have more footage than what you sent me?" "I have the entire 15-minute operation from multiple camera angles," I said. "Plus documentation of every suspicious violation for the past 4 months. This is the most clear-cut case of HOA fraud I've seen in my 15-year career," Marcus said. "Mr. Patterson, with your permission, I would like to represent you, and I think we need to move quickly and aggressively. What they did isn't just an HOA matter. It's criminal." We talked for another hour. Marcus explained that what Patricia and Janet had done constituted criminal trespassing, fraud, harassment, and potentially extortion, depending on what we could prove about the previous violations. He wanted to file a police report immediately, pursue criminal charges, and simultaneously hit the HOA with a civil lawsuit for damages, emotional distress, and attorney's fees. "How much are we talking about in the civil suit?" I asked. "Based on what you're telling me and what I can see in this footage, I think we can make a case for at least $50,000 in damages, possibly more if we can prove a pattern of harassment against other homeowners." My head was spinning. This had escalated from annoying HOA fines to a potential criminal case with a $50,000 lawsuit in the span of about 8 hours. "Let's do it," I said. "All of it. I want them held accountable for everything." Marcus and I agreed to meet at his office first thing in the morning to file the police report together and begin formal proceedings. I finally got to bed around 2 a.m., my mind still racing but feeling more satisfied than I had in months. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I wasn't actually sick, but I knew I had a long day ahead of me and I needed to be focused. Marcus's office was in Scottsdale, about a 20-minute drive from my house in the growing Phoenix suburbs. His building was modern glass and steel, and his office on the 4th floor had a view of Camelback Mountain. Marcus Chen was younger than I expected, probably late 30s, with dark hair styled carefully and wearing a suit that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. He shook my hand firmly and gestured to a chair across from his massive desk. "I've been reviewing your footage all morning," he said, turning his computer monitor so I could see. He had the video queued up. "This is absolutely damning evidence. But I want to make sure we have everything documented properly before we proceed. Walk me through the entire timeline of harassment." I spent the next hour explaining everything: the vote against the dues increase, the subsequent violations that seemed to appear out of nowhere, my suspicions, the decision to install cameras. Marcus took notes on a legal pad, occasionally stopping me to ask clarifying questions. "Did you ever confront Patricia about your suspicions?" he asked. "No, I figured if I was right, confronting her would just make her more careful. And if I was wrong, I'd look paranoid." "Smart," Marcus said. "Very smart, and you have documentation of all your property maintenance, photos, receipts?" "Everything. I kept every receipt for paint, every lawn service invoice, everything." Marcus smiled. It was a predatory smile that made me glad he was on my side. "Mr. Patterson, we're going to destroy them." We spent another hour preparing the police report. Marcus had a contact at the Phoenix Police Department, a detective Sarah Morneau who worked in the fraud division. Marcus called her directly and explained the situation. She agreed to meet us at the police station within the hour to take the report personally. The police station was busy and overwhelming, but Detective Morneau met us in the lobby and escorted us to a private interview room. She was in her mid-40s, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. "Let me see the footage," she said without preamble. Marcus pulled out his laptop and played the entire 15-minute video. Detective Morneau watched without expression, though I saw her eyebrows rise slightly when Patricia and Janet struggled with the shopping cart. "And you have this saved in multiple locations?" she asked when the video finished. "3 separate locations," I confirmed. "Plus it's still on the camera company's cloud servers? Good." She turned to her computer and started typing. "I'm going to take your full statement, Mr. Patterson, and then we'll need you to provide us with copies of all footage and documentation. Based on what I'm seeing here, we have grounds for criminal trespassing at minimum. Possibly fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and depending on what we uncover, this could extend to extortion." The formal statement took another 2 hours. Detective Morneau was thorough, asking me about every detail of every violation, every interaction with Patricia, every piece of documentation I had. She seemed particularly interested in the violation notices themselves. "These are official HOA documents," she said, examining one of the notices. "Which means they were using their position in the HOA to commit fraud. That's going to be relevant for charging purposes." When we finally finished, Detective Morneau stood and shook my hand. "Mr. Patterson, I'm going to be honest with you. This is one of the clearest cases of fraud I've seen. Your documentation is excellent, your video evidence is irrefutable. We'll need to do some investigation, but I anticipate we'll be filing charges within the week." "What happens then?" I asked. "We'll bring them in for questioning. Based on what we have, I expect we'll arrest them on the spot. They'll be arraigned, bail will be set, and then we proceed through the criminal justice system. The district attorney will make the final call on charges, but I'll be recommending the maximum we can justify." Walking out of the police station, I felt like I was floating. This was really happening. Patricia and Janet were going to face actual criminal charges for what they'd done. Marcus and I went to lunch at a Mexican restaurant near his office. Over fish tacos and iced tea, we discussed the civil strategy. "I want to move on the lawsuit immediately," Marcus said. "We don't need to wait for the criminal case to resolve. In fact, filing now while the criminal investigation is active will put additional pressure on the HOA and might force a quick settlement." "What are we suing for exactly?" I asked. "Harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud, trespass, and violation of the HOA's own governing documents. We'll also sue for attorney's fees and costs. The beauty of suing an HOA is that we're really suing all the homeowners collectively since the HOA is funded by dues. Once the other homeowners realize that Patricia's vendetta is going to cost them money out of their own pockets, the pressure on her will be enormous." "How long does something like this usually take?" "Civil cases can drag on for years, but with evidence this strong, I'd expect the HOA's insurance company to push for settlement within 6 months. They're not going to want this going to trial. The video alone would turn any jury against them immediately." I went home that afternoon feeling more hopeful than I had in months. I finally told Rachel everything that evening. She came over after work, and I showed her the footage and explained the whole situation. "Oh my God," she said, watching Patricia stab the pink flamingo into my lawn. "Oh my God, David, this is insane. She actually did this." "She actually did this," I confirmed, "and now she's going to pay for it." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "You know this is going to get ugly, right? Patricia isn't going to just roll over, she's going to fight back." "Let her fight," I said. "I have video evidence of her committing a crime. What's she going to do?" I found out the next morning. I woke up to my phone exploding with text messages and missed calls. 17 messages from neighbors. 8 missed calls, 3 voicemails. My stomach dropped as I started reading through them. "David, what the hell is going on?" From my neighbor Tom. "Did you really threaten Patricia?" From Susan across the street. "I can't believe you would do something like this. We thought you were better than this." From the Hendersons. I felt cold all over. I called Tom back immediately. "What are you talking about?" I asked as soon as he picked up. "What's going on? Dude, check your email," Tom said. "Patricia sent out a mass email to the entire neighborhood last night. She's saying you threatened her, that you've been harassing her for months, and that you're filing a frivolous lawsuit to intimidate her. She's painting you as some kind of psycho." I hung up and immediately opened my email. Sure enough, there was an email from Patricia sent to the entire Sunset Ridge HOA mailing list at 11 p.m. last night. The subject line was "Safety Concerns Regarding David Patterson." The email was a masterpiece of manipulation. Patricia claimed that I had been increasingly unstable and aggressive since the HOA meeting months ago. She said I had been following her around the neighborhood, taking photos of her house, and making veiled threats about getting revenge. She claimed that I had been deliberately violating HOA rules to provoke confrontation, and when she had professionally and courteously issued violations, I had responded with hostility and threats of legal action. The email went on to say that she had tried to handle the situation quietly to protect my privacy, but that I had now escalated to the point of filing false police reports and threatening frivolous lawsuits. She was writing to warn the neighbors that I might be dangerous, and that everyone should be careful around me and report any concerning behavior to the police. The email ended with a plea for everyone to support your HOA board during this difficult time, and a reminder that the HOA was considering additional security measures to protect residents from unstable individuals. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking with rage. This was textbook defamation. She was lying to the entire neighborhood, trying to isolate me, trying to make me look like the bad guy before anyone found out the truth. I immediately forwarded the email to Marcus Chen with the subject line, "She's escalating." He called me back within 5 minutes. "This is good for us," Marcus said calmly. "I know it doesn't feel that way right now, but this is actually very good for us." "How is this good? She's telling everyone I'm dangerous." "She's panicking," Marcus said. "People who are confident in their position don't send mass emails calling their opponents dangerous. She knows the police are investigating. She's trying to get ahead of the narrative and control the story." But David, here's what she doesn't know. Everything she just wrote in that email is provably false. And when the truth comes out, which it will very soon, everyone who read that email is going to remember that she lied to them. "So what do I do?" "Nothing," Marcus said firmly. "Do not respond. Do not engage. Do not send any emails to anyone. I know you want to defend yourself, but trust me, the best thing you can do right now is stay completely silent. Let her dig her own grave. What about the neighbors? They all think I'm some kind of stalker now. The truth will come out. Within a week, maybe 2, the criminal charges will be filed and it will become public record. At that point, everyone will know exactly what Patricia did. Your name will be cleared. But if you start engaging now, you'll just look defensive and you might say something she can use against you. Stay silent. Trust the process." I hated his advice, but I knew he was right. I spent the rest of the day answering worried texts from the few neighbors who actually bothered to ask my side of things, carefully saying only that there was an ongoing legal matter and I couldn't discuss it, but the truth would come out soon. It was one of the longest weeks of my life. I went to work and tried to focus, but my mind kept drifting to Patricia and what she might be doing. I kept checking my phone for updates from Marcus or Detective Morneau. The neighbors mostly avoided me. A few gave me suspicious looks when I checked my mail or mowed my lawn. Rachel was supportive, but even she was getting anxious. "What if the police don't file charges?" she asked one night. "What if they decide there's not enough evidence?" "There's a video of her putting trash on my lawn," I said. "How is that not enough evidence?" "I don't know, I'm just worried." Patricia has connections. What if she knows someone who can make this go away? I couldn't let myself think like that. I had to trust that the system would work, that justice would prevail, that video evidence of a crime would be enough. 8 days after I filed the police report, Detective Morneau called me. "Mr. Patterson, we're executing arrest warrants for Patricia Mooreland and Janet Crawford this afternoon. I wanted to give you a heads up. This will become public very quickly and you may get contacted by media." My heart was racing. What are the charges? Criminal trespassing, fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud for both of them. We're also charging Miss Mooreland with extortion based on the pattern of violations and fines. The district attorney felt we had sufficient evidence to prosecute. What happens now? We'll arrest them, they'll be arraigned, bail will be set. The arraignment is public record, so the details of the charges will become public at that point. I recommend you prepare a brief statement in case media contacts you. Keep it simple, factual, no editorializing. I immediately called Marcus and told him. He was thrilled. "Perfect timing," he said. "I was planning to file the civil lawsuit tomorrow anyway. Now we can file the same day the arrests become public. Maximum impact." That afternoon, I couldn't focus on anything. I kept refreshing the local news websites, looking for any mention of the arrests. Finally, around 6 p.m., a headline appeared on the Phoenix local news site. HOA president and vice president arrested on fraud charges. The article was brief but damning. It outlined the basic facts: that Patricia Mooreland and Janet Crawford had been arrested for allegedly planting fake violations on a homeowner's property and then fining him. The article mentioned that the arrests were based on video evidence and that both women had been released on $10,000 bail each. My phone started ringing immediately, first from neighbors, then from a reporter at the local news station. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I sent a carefully worded text to the neighbors who reached out. "I appreciate your concern. This has been a difficult situation, but I'm glad the truth is coming out. I'll have more to say once the legal process is complete." The story exploded over the next 48 hours. The local news picked it up, then the Phoenix stations, then it went viral on social media. There was something about the story that captured people's attention. Corrupt HOA president, elaborate frame job, dramatic video evidence. It had all the elements of a good revenge story. The Sunset Ridge HOA Facebook group, which I rarely checked, was absolute chaos. Homeowners were furious. Many were demanding Patricia's resignation. Others were sharing their own stories of suspicious violations and harassment. A few were defending Patricia, claiming there must be more to the story, but they were quickly shouted down by people demanding accountability. Marcus filed the civil lawsuit exactly as planned. The local news covered that too, especially when they got hold of some of the video footage through public records requests. Seeing Patricia and Janet hauling that toilet planter across my lawn played on the evening news was surreal and satisfying in equal measure. 3 days after the arrests, I received a certified letter from the HOA. It was signed by 3 board members I barely knew, the treasurer and 2 regular members. Patricia and Janet had been placed on administrative leave from their board positions pending the outcome of the criminal cases. The letter also informed me that all violations and fines against my property had been suspended pending review, and that the board would be conducting a full audit of all violations issued during Patricia's tenure. That letter felt like vindication, but I knew the fight wasn't over. The preliminary hearing for the criminal case was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Marcus explained that this was mostly a formality. The judge would determine if there was enough evidence to proceed to trial. Given that we had video evidence, he wasn't worried. In the meantime, life in Sunset Ridge got increasingly weird. I couldn't walk to my mailbox without neighbors stopping me to talk. Some wanted to apologize for believing Patricia's email. Others wanted to share their own HOA horror stories. A few wanted to know if they could join my lawsuit. Tom, my neighbor who had been one of the first to text me when Patricia's email went out, came over one evening with a 6-pack of beer. "I owe you an apology," he said, handing me a beer as we sat on my back patio. "I should have asked you directly what was going on instead of just believing Patricia's email." "It's fine," I said. "She was convincing, that's what manipulators do." "Yeah, but still, I've lived here for 8 years and I always thought Patricia was just overly strict, you know." I didn't realize she was actually corrupt. Now I'm looking back at violations I've gotten over the years, and I'm wondering if any of them were legit. "You should talk to Marcus," I said. "He's collecting information from other homeowners about their experiences with Patricia. If there's a pattern of harassment, it strengthens my case and might give other people grounds to sue too." Tom nodded slowly. "I might do that. I got fined $500 2 years ago because my garage door was supposedly left open overnight. I know for a fact I closed it, David." "I always close it. But I paid the fine because I figured maybe I forgot one time, you know. Now I'm wondering if Patricia snuck into my yard and opened it herself just to take a photo." That conversation stuck with me. How many people had Patricia done this to? How much money had she extracted from innocent homeowners through fake violations? Marcus was thinking the same thing. He put out a call through social media and local news asking any Sunset Ridge residents who felt they had been unfairly targeted by the HOA to contact his office. Within a week, he had over 30 responses. The preliminary hearing arrived on a Thursday morning in October. The Phoenix weather was finally starting to cool down, dropping into the pleasant 80s during the day. I took the day off work and met Marcus at the courthouse downtown. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, and not as dramatic as the ones on TV. Patricia and Janet sat with their lawyers at one table while I sat with Marcus at another. Patricia looked different than I'd ever seen her. No designer workout clothes or expensive jewelry. She wore a plain navy blazer and looked tired. She didn't look at me once. Janet, on the other hand, kept glancing over at me with this expression of pure fear. Her lawyer, a young guy who looked fresh out of law school, kept whispering to her urgently. The hearing itself was anticlimactic. The prosecutor, a stern woman in her 50s named Lisa Hartman, presented the basic facts of the case and submitted the video evidence. The judge, an older man with gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose, watched the video on a laptop with no visible reaction. Patricia's lawyer, an expensive-looking man in a 3-piece suit, argued that this was a civil matter that had been improperly escalated to criminal charges. He claimed that Patricia, as HOA president, had the authority to inspect properties and issue violations, and that any dispute over the legitimacy of those violations should be handled through HOA procedures or civil court. Judge Rodriguez was not impressed. "Counselor, I just watched your client dump trash on Mr. Patterson's lawn and then fine him for it. That's not a good faith exercise of HOA authority. That's fraud. Motion denied. This case will proceed to trial." He set the trial date for January 15th and dismissed everyone. Walking out of the courthouse, Marcus was grinning. That went exactly as expected. Rodriguez is a no-nonsense judge. He's not going to let them hide behind HOA procedures to avoid criminal liability. "What are the chances they take a plea deal?" I asked. "Very high," Marcus said. "Especially for Janet. She's clearly the follower in this dynamic. Her lawyer knows she's screwed if this goes to trial. The video shows her actively participating, and she has no defense. My guess is she'll flip on Patricia, take a plea deal with reduced charges, and cooperate with the prosecution." He was right. 2 weeks later, Janet Crawford pled guilty to criminal trespassing and conspiracy to commit fraud. In exchange for her plea and her testimony against Patricia, she received 2 years of probation, a $5,000 fine, and 500 hours of community service. She also resigned from the HOA board and was permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in Arizona. The details of her plea were reported in the local news, including the fact that she had agreed to testify against Patricia. The article mentioned that Janet's testimony revealed the fake violations had been going on for over 2 years and had targeted at least 12 different homeowners. 12 homeowners. Marcus immediately reached out to all 12 and offered to represent them in a class action lawsuit against the HOA. 8 of them signed on immediately. Patricia's trial was scheduled for mid-January, but her legal situation was deteriorating rapidly. With Janet's testimony and cooperation, the prosecution's case became even stronger. The DA added additional fraud charges based on other violations that Janet testified were fabricated. The civil lawsuit was moving forward in parallel. Marcus had filed a motion for summary judgment, arguing that the video evidence was so clear that there was no point in going to trial. The HOA's insurance company lawyers fought back, but without much conviction. They knew they were going to lose. In early December, Marcus called me with news. The insurance company wants to settle. They're offering $75,000 to make this go away. $75,000. That was 50% more than our initial demand. What do you think? I asked. I think we take it, Marcus said. We could potentially get more if we went to trial, but trials are unpredictable and expensive. $75,000 is a good result, and more importantly, it sends a message. The other homeowners who signed onto the class action are going to see this settlement and know their cases are strong too. Do it, I said. The settlement was finalized within 2 weeks. The HOA's insurance company paid $75,000, $50,000 of which went to me after Marcus took his fee. The settlement also included a formal apology from the HOA board, removal of all violations from my record, and a commitment to implement new oversight procedures to prevent future abuse. But I wasn't satisfied with just the money. I wanted Patricia held fully accountable. Her criminal trial began on January 15th in the same courthouse where the preliminary hearing had been held. This time, the courtroom was packed. Local media was there, along with dozens of Sunset Ridge residents who wanted to see Patricia face justice. The prosecution's case was devastating. They played the full video of Patricia and Janet planting evidence. They called Janet as a witness, and she testified for over 2 hours about the scheme. She described how Patricia had convinced her to help, claiming they were teaching problem homeowners a lesson. She testified about specific instances where they had planted evidence or fabricated violations, including my situation. The prosecutor also called several other homeowners who testified about suspicious violations they had received. One woman described getting fined because her house numbers were too faded, even though she had just replaced them the month before. Another man testified about getting fined for visible trash cans when he knew for certain they had been behind his fence. Patricia's defense was weak. Her lawyer tried to argue that she genuinely believed the violations were real, that maybe someone else had dumped the trash on my lawn and she had simply documented it. But the video made that argument impossible. You could clearly see Patricia carrying items from her own car and placing them on my property. On the 4th day of trial, Patricia took the stand in her own defense. It was a disaster. She tried to maintain that she was just doing her job as HOA president, but under cross-examination by Lisa Hartman, she fell apart. Miss Mooreland, can you explain why you were carrying a pink flamingo in your car on the afternoon of September 23rd? Lisa asked. I don't remember. Maybe I had just bought it. You just bought a pink flamingo and a broken toilet planter and 15 garden gnomes and a shopping cart, and you happened to be driving past Mr. Patterson's house with all of these items in your car. I don't remember exactly what happened that day. You don't remember, but we have video evidence showing you taking these items out of your car and placing them on Mr. Patterson's property. Was that someone who looked like you? No, that was me, but And then you took photographs of these items and issued a violation notice within an hour, correct? Yes, but... And you fined Mr. Patterson $1,500 for violations that you yourself created, correct? Patricia was crying at this point. I was trying to protect the community. David had been so hostile, so aggressive. I was trying to maintain standards. By framing him for violations he didn't commit. I just wanted him to understand that rules matter, that he couldn't just do whatever he wanted. It was a confession. Not a legal confession exactly, but close enough. The jury saw through her completely. The trial lasted 6 days total. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts: fraud, extortion, criminal trespassing, and conspiracy. Patricia sat stone-faced as the verdicts were read, but I saw tears running down her cheeks. Sentencing was scheduled for 4 weeks later. In Arizona, fraud and extortion convictions can carry serious prison time, though first-time offenders often get probation. Marcus warned me not to expect Patricia to go to prison, but I was hoping for at least some jail time. The sentencing hearing was emotional. Several homeowners gave victim impact statements describing how Patricia's actions had affected them financially and emotionally. One elderly man testified that he had been so stressed by constant HOA violations and fines that his doctor had put him on blood pressure medication. I gave my own victim impact statement. I had written it carefully, trying to convey the fear and paranoia I had felt when violations kept appearing out of nowhere, not knowing if I was losing my mind or being targeted. I described the financial impact of the fines, the stress on my relationship with Rachel, the way Patricia's defamatory email had poisoned my relationships with neighbors. Your Honor, I concluded, Patricia Mooreland abused her position of trust in our community. She used the power of the HOA to harass and extort money from homeowners who crossed her. She needs to be held accountable not just for what she did to me, but for what she did to all of us. Judge Rodriguez listened carefully to all the victim statements. Then he addressed Patricia directly. Miss Mooreland, you were elected to a position of trust in your community. Homeowners relied on you to enforce rules fairly and impartially. Instead, you engaged in a deliberate, calculated scheme to defraud and harass your neighbors. You planted evidence, you created false violations, and you extracted thousands of dollars in fraudulent fines. When you were caught, you attempted to defame Mr. Patterson and paint yourself as the victim. This court finds your conduct to be particularly egregious because it was an abuse of authority and trust. He sentenced her to 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution of $43,000 to the 12 homeowners who had been targeted, plus court costs and fines totaling another $20,000. 18 months. It wasn't a long sentence, but it was prison time. Patricia would actually go to jail for what she had done. The courtroom erupted in applause when the sentence was announced. Judge Rodriguez had to bang his gavel to restore order. Patricia was led out in handcuffs, and for the first time, I felt like justice had truly been served. The aftermath was surprisingly positive. The Sunset Ridge HOA board was completely restructured. Every remaining board member from Patricia's era resigned, and the homeowners elected an entirely new board committed to transparency and fairness. The new board implemented new procedures requiring photos with timestamps and metadata for all violations, mandatory review periods before fines could be issued, and an independent appeals process for disputed violations. The HOA's insurance company settled the class action lawsuit with the other targeted homeowners for a total of $200,000, distributed among the 8 plaintiffs. Combined with the criminal restitution, the affected homeowners were made financially whole. Marcus Chen became something of a local celebrity. He started getting calls from homeowners across Arizona dealing with HOA disputes. He ended up expanding his practice and hiring 2 additional lawyers to handle the volume of HOA cases. As for me, life slowly returned to normal. The neighbors who had believed Patricia's lies apologized, some more sincerely than others. Rachel and I got engaged 6 months after the trial, partly because going through the whole ordeal together had strengthened our relationship. I proposed to her in my front yard, right where Patricia had planted that stupid pink flamingo. Tom and a few other neighbors started a neighborhood watch group, but instead of watching for crime, we watched the HOA board to make sure no one ever abused their power like Patricia had. We attended every board meeting, reviewed every budget, questioned every decision. The new board didn't love the scrutiny, but they tolerated it because they understood the community's trust needed to be rebuilt. I kept my security cameras up. Some people might think that was paranoid, but after everything I had been through, I felt better knowing I had video evidence of everything that happened on my property. The cameras had saved me from Patricia's scheme, and they gave me peace of mind. About a year after Patricia's sentencing, I got a letter from her. It was forwarded through the prison system, and for a moment I considered not opening it. But curiosity got the better of me. The letter was handwritten on cheap lined paper. Patricia's normally perfect penmanship was shaky and uneven. "David," it began. "I know you have no reason to listen to anything I have to say, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. What I did to you was wrong. What I did to all the homeowners was wrong. I let my need for control and my anger over losing that vote turn me into someone I don't recognize. I convinced myself that I was protecting the community, but really, I was just punishing people who disagreed with me. I destroyed my own life, hurt my family, and damaged an entire neighborhood because I couldn't let go of power. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself. But I wanted you to know that I take full responsibility for what I did, and I'm sorry." I read the letter twice, then put it in a drawer. I didn't feel the need to respond. The apology, if it was genuine, was appreciated, but it didn't change what had happened. Patricia had made her choices, and she was paying the consequences. Life moved on. Rachel and I got married in a small ceremony in Sedona. We talked about moving away from Sunset Ridge, getting a fresh start somewhere else, but ultimately decided to stay. This was our home. We weren't going to let Patricia's actions drive us away from a house and a community we loved. The security footage that had exposed Patricia's scheme became something of a legend in our neighborhood. New homeowners moving into Sunset Ridge would hear the story and immediately install their own cameras. The Ring doorbell company should have paid me a commission for all the business I generated. 2 years after the trial, I was elected to the HOA board. I had never wanted to be involved in HOA politics, but several neighbors convinced me that my experience made me the perfect person to help ensure transparency and accountability. I ran on a platform of minimal rules, fair enforcement, and financial responsibility. I won by a landslide. Serving on the HOA board gave me a new perspective. I understood now how easy it would be to abuse that power, how tempting it might be to use HOA rules to settle personal scores. But I also understood the importance of having people in those positions who were committed to doing the right thing. We simplified the covenant, eliminating dozens of petty rules that served no real purpose. We implemented a policy that violations would only be issued for things that genuinely affected property values or safety, not for trash cans being visible for an extra hour or mailbox posts having tiny scratches. We made the budget completely transparent and held quarterly town halls where homeowners could ask questions and voice concerns. It wasn't perfect. There were still disputes and disagreements, but it was fair and it was honest, and that made all the difference. Patricia was released from prison after serving 14 months with good behavior. I heard through the neighborhood gossip network that she had moved to Tucson to live with her sister. She sold her Sunset Ridge house at a significant loss because homes in our neighborhood were now described in listing documents as previously affected by HOA fraud scandal. I felt a small twinge of satisfaction knowing that her actions had impacted her financially as well. Janet Crawford also moved away after her probation ended. I heard she got a job working at a veterinary clinic and kept a very low profile. I actually felt some sympathy for Janet. She had been Patricia's accomplice, but it was clear she had been manipulated and pressured into participating. She had paid her debt to society and was trying to rebuild her life. I hoped she succeeded. The $50,000 I received from the settlement went to several places. Part of it paid off some credit card debt and student loans. Part of it went into savings for the wedding and eventually a down payment on Rachel's car. And part of it, about $10,000, I donated to a nonprofit organization that provides legal assistance to homeowners dealing with HOA disputes. Marcus Chen was on the board of directors, and he told me the donation helped them represent 3 families who otherwise couldn't afford legal representation. Looking back on the whole experience, I'm struck by how easily it could have gone differently. If I hadn't installed those cameras, Patricia would have gotten away with it. I would have paid the fines, possibly been forced to sell my house if the violations continued escalating, and she would have moved on to her next target. The cameras cost me about $1,500 to install, the same amount as Patricia's fake violation fine. Best $1,500 I ever spent. I also think about all the people who don't have the resources or knowledge to fight back against HOA abuse. Not everyone can afford to hire a lawyer like Marcus Chen. Not everyone thinks to install security cameras or document everything meticulously. How many people out there are being victimized by corrupt HOA board members and just accepting it because they don't know they have options? That's part of why I agreed to share my story with local news and eventually with a couple of national news outlets who picked it up. I wanted people to know that HOA board members can be held accountable, that you don't have to just accept abuse, that documentation and evidence matter. The story resonated with people all over the country. I got emails from homeowners in Florida, Texas, Colorado, and Nevada, all sharing their own HOA horror stories. Some asked for advice, some just wanted to vent. A few told me that my story had inspired them to fight back against their own abusive HOA boards. I tried to respond to as many as I could, always with the same advice. Document everything, install cameras if you can afford them, get legal advice early, and don't let them intimidate you into silence. 3 years after the trial, on a warm evening in March, I was sitting on my back patio with Rachel and Tom and his wife Sarah. We were grilling burgers and drinking beer, talking about normal neighborhood stuff like the upcoming HOA meeting and whether we should push for resurfacing the community pool. "You know what's crazy?" Tom said suddenly. 3 years ago, we were living in a dictatorship and we didn't even realize it. Patricia was basically running her own little authoritarian regime and we all just accepted it. "Not all of us," Rachel said, squeezing my hand. "David didn't accept it." "Only because I had evidence," I said. If I hadn't had those cameras, I would have looked like a paranoid conspiracy theorist. The only reason anyone believed me was because I could prove what was happening. "That's the scary part," Sarah said. "How many other HOAs are run by people like Patricia who just haven't been caught yet?" It was a sobering question and I didn't have a good answer. But I did know this. In Sunset Ridge, things were different now. We had learned our lesson about accountability and transparency. We had learned that power without oversight leads to corruption, and that communities are strongest when everyone is paying attention and speaking up. My house, the same house that had been the target of Patricia's scheme, was now just a house again. A normal house in a normal neighborhood with a properly maintained lawn and approved paint colors, and everything else the covenant required. But more importantly, it was a house where I felt safe, where I didn't have to worry about false violations or vindictive board members or manufactured crises. The pink flamingo incident, as it became known in neighborhood lore, was now history. but it was history that we remembered and learned from. The new board kept a framed copy of one of Patricia's fake violation notices in the HOA office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked. I still checked my security camera footage occasionally, usually when I was bored or couldn't sleep. Mostly it showed the mailman, delivery drivers, the occasional dog walker, normal life in a normal neighborhood. But every time I opened that app and saw the clear, high-definition footage of my property, I felt grateful. Grateful for the technology that had saved me. Grateful for the lawyer who had fought for me. Grateful for the detective and prosecutor who had taken my case seriously. Grateful for the judge who had held Patricia accountable. And grateful for the neighbors who, once they knew the truth, had stood beside me. The whole experience changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I'm more careful now, more aware of the potential for abuse in systems of power. I'm also more willing to speak up when I see something wrong, because I learned that silence enables corruption. Rachel says I'm still a rule follower at heart, and she's right. I still maintain my lawn precisely, still park my car carefully in my driveway, still put my trash cans away promptly. But now I follow the rules because they make sense and benefit the community, not because I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't. And if I ever got another violation notice, you better believe I'd check my security footage first before paying a single cent. The saga of Patricia Mooreland and the Sunset Ridge HOA became one of those local stories that people never quite forgot. Years later, I would still occasionally meet someone at a party or a work event who would hear where I lived and say, "Wait, Sunset Ridge. Isn't that the neighborhood with the crazy HOA president who went to prison?" And I would smile and say, yes, that was us, and yes, it was quite a story. And then, if they seemed genuinely interested, I would tell them the whole thing, from the first suspicious violation to the final sentencing hearing. And every time I told it, I was reminded of how close I came to being just another victim, another homeowner who paid unfair fines and accepted abuse because fighting back seemed impossible. But I had fought back, and I had won, and that made all the difference.